Hi, my name is Sam, and we're going to do some yoga today. Thank you so much for joining me for our basics yoga practice today. The level of this class being basics really just means that we're focusing more on the fundamentals, which is great for building a foundation for your practice so that you can advance and move further if you'd like. Or you can always use this kind of a practice to come back to the foundation and the fundamentals if you already have an advanced practice, and to fine tune. So let's get ourselves set up to practice today. Hopefully you've got your space set up and you've got your mat, or maybe you're just at home and you're using your rug, which is perfectly fine. As for props, I encourage you, if you have them, to have a couple of blocks at your mat. That can be incredibly helpful. 2 yoga blocks may or may not come in handy, which means you may or may not need them. And I will simply refer to them as options that you will have. Now, if you don't have yoga blocks, that's okay. Something that I had been doing at home over the course of quarantine was instructing stacking books. Maybe you've had another teacher inform that as well. So if you've got a few books that you can stack together that can help you while you practice, definitely have those at your mat as well. And then I always like to have a blanket handy. I've got one kind of over there. A nice thick blanket that can help support your mat space so that your joints, if like you put your knee down on the ground or something and that feels a little sharp or uncomfortable, a blanket can definitely help. But again, these are props that you may or may not need. They may or may not come in handy, and you don't have to have. So we'll do our best to keep everything pretty prop free for our basics class today. And I hope you enjoy. We're going to begin our practice. Please meet me in a comfortable seated position on your mat. So the ankles or the shins can be crossed or stacked. Knees open wide, and we'll begin with the hands over the knees gently. Let's turn the palms to either face up or down based on what you feel is most comfortable. Check in with your seat and feel for your back to be nice and spacious and not rounded. You can scoot your butt back a little bit, wiggle your sit bones back a little bit so that you can make some space. You could even sit on top of one of your props, like a block or a blanket. And once your seat is all set up, let's roll the shoulders back over the hips, draw the chin slightly down, close your eyes gently. Let's take these first few moments to breathe on our own. It's like we're welcoming ourselves to our practice, and we're also arriving to our practice. You'll notice maybe some of the things going on that you can sense. Maybe it is a feeling inside, the temperature outside. Maybe you're seeing a specific color or texture behind your eyelids. Maybe there are things that you're hearing, my voice, maybe something else. And maybe you're noticing that you are tuned in to one or more of those things with a little more ease, a little more naturally. Some of these things, they stand out to us. They are clearer in our field of awareness. So we're a little bit more attuned to those things. And in our practice today, we're going to be connecting to this idea of tuning in. It's a really big, important concept in our yoga practice. It's one of the things that it teaches us to do and offers us something to connect with when we practice. It's one of the reasons that we practice. And we've already begun. We sat, and as soon as we closed our eyes, we started to tune our awareness inward, into ourselves. So there are lots of different things that we can be aware of, and we can be aware of what's going on inside as well as outside. And that can also take on a lot of different levels of awareness, and it can pull our awareness in a lot of different directions. So in our practice today, we're sort of connecting to this concept that we can be aware at all, and then we can bring our awareness into whatever space we're in. So let's essentially bring ourselves online as fully as possible today. Begin to notice what we give our attention to, and actually practice giving our attention to where we are in space. Please draw both palms together in front of your heart for prayer. Lift your heart up into your thumbs, spread your fingers wide, crown of the head tall. Let's begin our practice fully by sounding one collective Om together. So even though we're all far away from each other and we're in different places and spaces, just knowing that when we collectively chant Om, right, we're creating this vibration that we're all tuning into at the same time, and that brings us all together. So please join me in preparing by exhaling all of the breath out of the nose first. Inhale deeply through the nose. Start to release your hands and blink your eyes open. And let's begin our practice by setting up on all fours first. So we're going to meet on our hands and our knees. And as you set yourself up, let's bring our awareness, right? So we're going to begin right away. We're going to bring our awareness, in other words, our attention, what we're focusing on, to what we're doing as we set up and how we set up. Start by checking in with your wrists and move them just a little bit wider than your shoulders side to side. I like to look at the fingers and spin the index fingers to point the most forward. Spread all of the other fingers apart. Separate the thumbs away from the first fingers. And then we're going to keep the hands right where they are. Plug them into the ground. Look back at your knees and line them up underneath your hips. All right. Once you find your knees directly underneath your hips, set up your feet behind your knees. Tuck your toes under, lift your heels high over your toes, and then spread your toes as wide as you can. Press down into the toe pads, and you might even feel like a little bit of the ball of your foot pressing into the ground, maybe. And now with your hands actively rooting down, please engage through your arms, roll your shoulders back, let out your next exhale. Let's get rid of the next breath, and then breathe in and lower the belly. Open your heart up, lift your hips high, maybe look up toward the sky, don't force it. And as you exhale, lift your belly, start rounding your back. And it should feel a little bit like you're doing like one crunch when you do this. Inhale, move the heart forward, lift the sit bones, open up the chest. Exhale, lift the belly, lift the ribs, round your back. So we're moving through our cow poses and our cat poses. We'll take a few more. Inhale, move with your breath. You don't have to sync up with me. Exhale, and as you release the breath, lift the belly, round your back. Last two. Inhale. Slowly taking the breath in, out of the nose, exhale. Rounding the back of the body. On your next inhale, take your gaze forward. Pause in about a neutral spine, so somewhere in between those two shapes we were just taking. And give your shoulder blades a little hug on the back of the body, just a little bit. Your chest will kind of widen apart. And then underneath you, lift the navel, pull it toward the spine just slightly. Okay, let's maintain that. Left hand is going to stay steady on the mat. Push it down. Inhale, send your right arm forward in front of you, lifting your wrist up about as high as your shoulder. Spin your right palm to face the left-hand side of your mat and spread all of your fingers apart. We're going to hold here for just a moment, and I'm going to bring your awareness. I'm going to guide your awareness to a couple of things. One is to be aware of your left hand. right? A lot of the action is going on when we move something, but what about the left hand? I want you to focus on pushing it down into the ground, even the base of the thumb, especially the base of the thumb and the base of the first finger. And while you're pushing the left hand down, keeping the foundation steady, bring your awareness also to your breath. And notice where you're breathing, how you're breathing, and let's pull the breath in and out of the nose. Shoulders engaged on the back of the body, navel still lifting, and then we're going to lift the right arm up, twist open to the right side, take a breath in, and as you exhale, please sweep your right arm underneath your chest, reach all the way to the left. Carefully lower your right shoulder onto the ground. And you line up your wrist with your shoulder, and the right palm faces up toward the sky. Left hand is still pushing down into the ground. The left hand is what we can call part of the foundation, and we want to set the foundation so that it's steady, right? So that the body's not just like worming around on our mat. And as you're doing that, we're breathing. We're breathing in and out of the nose. Still tuned in. Feel your breath move into the back of your body. And as you exhale, just watch it leave your body. And let's start to walk the left hand forward. So we're going to change the foundation. Walk your left hand all the way forward toward the front of the mat, maybe past the front of your mat, and then come up high onto the tips of your fingers. Lift up your palm, lift up your knuckles. We're going to stay here for a couple more breaths. Pulling the right hip slightly to the right. Open the left side of the body and take one more inhale and exhale here. When you're ready, step your left hand back, press down through your palm. Come all the way back up to table pose. Check in. Notice where you've set up your right hand. Wrist is a little bit wider than the shoulder, first finger forward. And then press the right hand down firmly. And as you do that, lift your left arm, floating your wrist just about in line with your shoulder. This time the left palm faces the right side. Spread your fingers wide and apart. We're going to hold and take a few breaths. And you're listening for your breath while you move. Right, that gives us a really clear connection. It's like tuning into a channel, right? A clear connection inward with ourselves the whole time. Pressing the right hand down continuously into the ground as we breathe in and out of the nose, holding here for one more breath. And then we'll open up into a twist. Reach your left arm up toward the sky, open your chest to the left, take your breath in. And as you exhale, thread your left arm underneath your chest, reach to the right, and carefully lower your head down. For now, just leave your right hand where it is so you can firmly press it down. And as you do that, just notice how it helps you roll a little bit more to your left side. Kind of like you're going to roll toward the back of your head. Knees and hips are still steady. You can check back in with that, right? So we're essentially checking in with our breath. We're tuning into our breath. We're tuning into where our body is placed in space as we set up our poses. Keeping the foundation steady and keeping ourselves connected. And now let's start to walk the right hand forward. And as you do that, we're going to come up onto the tips of the fingers again. So the right arm is completely straight. And as you're on the tips of the fingers, I like to think of it as like you're making a little tent with your hand, but it also kind of looks like you're making a spider with your hand. Pop up through the wrist, lift up the right arm, and then roll back. One more full breath. A full breath is a full inhale as well as a full exhale. And start to step the right hand back and come all the way up out of the twist, placing both hands directly down on the ground. And now we're going to keep the hands steady. Check back in with your alignment. See that the wrists are still outer shoulder width distance apart and first fingers are forward. Now press down evenly through both hands down into the mat and step the ball of your right foot all the way back behind you. The right leg is straight, and if you look underneath you, your kneecap is facing the ground. Now we're going to keep that alignment and just lift the right foot off of the ground. Heel is about as high as the hip. It doesn't have to go super high. Okay, just check in to feel that you didn't just pop your hip open. Okay, keep spinning the right toes, kneecap, and even the pointy part of your right hip to face the ground. Okay, now push the right hand down again firmly into the mat and inhale your left arm forward in front of you. Let's keep the shoulders back on the body, spread apart your fingers. Together we'll breathe in deeply and puff up the back of the body. And as you exhale, draw the elbow and the knee toward each other. Completing the exhale, and then we're going to inhale and stretch back out. Exhale, draw the elbow and the knee toward each other. Inhale, lengthen back out. Let's do one more. On an exhale, draw the elbow and the knee toward each other. They don't have to touch, by the way. Inhale, lengthen out. Pause here. Press your right heel back. Open your heart. Lift your belly and stretch. And then when you're ready, left hand to the mat. Right knee down to the ground. Tuck your toes. And then we're going to switch sides. So press down into your hands, step the ball of the left foot back, and then just hang out here for a second. If you look underneath you when you step your left foot back, you'll notice, right, that doing this kind of automatically sends the left knee to face the ground. The hip point is more prone to face the ground as well. But when we lift the leg, right, our hips will kind of do whatever tendency is going to feel best to help us lift the leg to whatever height we think we need to be at. So let's focus here on keeping this alignment. Okay, keep your awareness on the left leg as you lift it. And when the left foot leaves the ground, right, you might notice that it's easier, it's definitely easier if you lean to the right and you open your hip up, right? But we're gonna keep ourselves in this position, squaring the hips, which really just means the left hip is facing the ground as well. Okay, spread apart your toes, curl the toenails towards your body. Left leg is strong. Okay, awareness to the left hand as you push it down, and continue to do that as you reach your right arm forward toward the front of your space. Spread apart your fingers. Draw the shoulders back, lift your belly, take one more big breath in when you're ready. And with your exhale, the elbow and the knee will move toward each other, a slight round to the back. Inhale, lengthen back out. Please flex your left foot. Exhale, elbow and knee move toward each other. Inhale, lengthen back out. Exhale, contract, like squeezing the belly. Inhale, lengthen all the way back out. Pause here, keeping the gaze slightly more down toward the ground. And then as you're ready, place the right hand down, place the left knee down on the ground, and then start to point your toes and bring the big toes into touch. Open your knees as wide as your mat side to side and set your hips back for child's pose. Then you can start walking your hands forward so that your arms are straight. But do please keep your wrists outer shoulder width distance apart, if not wider, which you can take the space up for if you need. If you're feeling a little crunchy in your neck, walk your hands away from each other. It's okay if your hips didn't move all the way down to your heels. It's okay if your hips are higher. There are lots of different ways to take any pose in the practice. For some of you, this might be a nice resting pose. For some of us, this is a pretty deep foot, ankle, knee, and hip stretch. Right, we're in a deep pose. So we can just bring an awareness even to how we're experiencing our practice. It doesn't have to be a certain way. And let's start to walk both hands over to the left, take them off of the mat. But when you take your hands off of your mat, please see that your hands are still pretty wide. That way you have space between your ears and your arms. We're going to take a few deep breaths into the right side of the body, and I really want you to focus on your breath as we're here. Big inhales moving into the right side body, which is that space between your hip and your armpit. And your rib cage is there. But also focus on your exhales being complete. So letting out just as much of an exhale as you're bringing in with your inhale, if not longer of an exhale. Okay, let's start to walk both hands back to the middle and all the way over to the right side. Same thing here. As you move the hands, we're bringing ourselves online in a way. That can be another way of thinking of our practice today, our theme, right? We're bringing our awareness to what we're doing and how we're doing it rather than just letting ourselves go into these things without attention, right? Without attention. And it becomes a little bit like a twofold kind of awareness, right? There's the awareness that's taking place inside and we can notice also inside. And we're also bringing awareness to what's taking place outside of ourselves. We've got a couple more breaths here. Keep the left hip heavy. You can even press your left ribs into the left side of your body. And then inhale, walk your hands back into the middle. Check the alignment of your hands. I'm gonna keep reminding us that we're gonna set the hands up about outer shoulder width distance apart. All right, so it's kind of like the base of my thumb is lined up with my outer armpit. First fingers forward. Keep this alignment of your hands, press them down, lift your hips, tuck your toes, and let's set the knees up off of the mat and we'll take our first downward facing dog. Now, as you go up into downward facing dog, it might feel good to move around. You can pedal out your legs, bend one knee at a time maybe. Take it slow. Give yourself full breaths here while also evenly rooting the hands and the fingertips. And whatever movement you're taking, it might be different from what I'm doing. It might be different from what I've said. We're all going to start coming to some stillness. So look back at your feet and set up your feet about as wide as your sit bones side to side. Line them up with kind of like the center of your glutes. Spin the toes forward. Heels are relatively invisible behind your toes, behind you. And start to bend your knees a bit here. Set them away from each other and drive your hips back behind you as much as you can. Bending your knees can help with this quite a bit, right? So your legs don't have to be straight in downward facing dog. Draw the shoulders back and relax your head in between your arms for just one more breath. Start to take your gaze forward, lift your hips high, and walk your feet up to your hands, setting up a forward fold at the top of your mat. And when you get there, check in with your feet, and we'll keep the alignment that we set up in down dog. So they're still about as wide as your sit bones. Spin the toes to point forward, and let's unlock the knees, maybe even bend them more so that you can touch the ground with the tips of your fingers. And this is where your blocks might come in handy. So if you've got blocks or books, you can place your blocks just underneath your shoulders, right? That way it's a little easier. The ground comes to you. It's really luxurious, right? You can still have your knees bent as you do this, by the way. And just checking in here and shifting the weight forward so that the heels and the balls of the feet are both steady. And I like to spread the toes apart, keep the feet active. Let's start to place the hands up onto the shins, front of the legs. On your next inhale, please lift your chest, roll the shoulders back, keep the gaze down and pause in this half fold. With the exhale, out of the nose, fold forward, bring your hands back down to the ground, and the blocks are going to count as the ground. Okay, we're going to do that 2 more times. Keep some weight in the balls of the feet. Place your hands up onto your shins, maybe even your knees or your thighs, and with your next breath in, come up halfway. Feel free to straighten the backs of your legs. If that doesn't feel okay, you can keep them bent. Exhale and fold forward. Let the head go. One more time. Place your hands up onto your shins, knees, or thighs. Lift up halfway. Pause in a flat back. Exhale and fold. Soften the knees, maybe bend them more, and feel the feet staying super steady like they're super glued on the mat. On your next breath in, sweep your arms out toward the sides of the room and then up toward the sky. Come up to stand. Exhale, please gather your palms together, lower your thumbs in front of your heart. Let's pause in prayer here for a moment. And just let the weight of your body sink down into your feet. We're going to do a few half sun salutations from here. So without lifting the feet, with your next breath in, reach both arms up toward the sky. Exhale, softly bend the knees. Begin to bow forward. Let the head go and bring your fingertips to the blocks or the ground. Next breath in, let's come up halfway, pausing to lengthen. Hands on the shins, the knees or the thighs. Exhale, fold forward and release the head. Plug both feet down, keep the knees soft. Inhale to rise. Sweep your arms up toward the sky and maybe look up. Exhale, gather your palms together in front of your heart for prayer. We'll do that twice more. Inhale, sweep the arms up. Exhale, soften the knees and fold forward. And just remember, stay with your breath. You don't have to move with my cues. Inhale, come up halfway and pause to lengthen. Backs of the legs are long, spine is long. Exhale out of the nose, fold forward. Press down through the feet. Inhale to rise up, arms overhead, spreading the fingers wide. Exhale, gather both palms, thumbs in front of the heart for prayer. Let's take one more. With your next inhale, sweep the arms back up. Exhale, bend the knees gently and fold forward. Inhale, please float up halfway and pause to lengthen. Feel your shoulders engage on the back of your body. Exhale, fold forward, let it go. Keep the feet where they are. Inhale to rise, sweep your arms up overhead. Exhale, palms together in front of the heart for prayer. Let's do a few full sun salutations, and we'll modify or work through some options in the sun salutations. And on the next inhale, sweep both arms up overhead. Exhale, soften the knees, fold forward, fingertips down on the ground. And just again, as a reminder, the blocks count. Please inhale to float up halfway and pause. Please lengthen the backs of the legs, lengthen the spine forward toward the top of the head. On the exhale, bend the knees forward, fold. Keep bending the knees so you can plant your palms flat down on the mat. You can move your blocks. And when your hands start to set on the mat, let's check back in with the alignment because we're already setting them up to be planted, to become the foundation. So wrists are going to be a little bit wider than the shoulders side to side, and first fingers will point forward. And begin to step or walk your feet back into plank pose, the top of a push-up, stacking the shoulders above the wrists, and setting up the feet just behind the sit bones, so like 6 inches of space in between your feet. Now please spread apart your toes, lift your heels high, and actively push your hands into the ground. Start to lower your knees down to the mat, all the way back behind your hips, right? So your thighs are as long as possible, and your hips are maybe a little bit lower than your shoulders here. We'll firm the thighs, and we're gonna firm the outer glutes. Take your gaze forward toward the top edge of your mat, and let's all take one big breath in together, puffing up the back of the body. With the exhale, bend your elbows in, lower all the way down to the ground, keep your belly firm. Start pointing your toes straight back behind you, line up your ankles with your hips, and on your next inhale, gently lift your heart up off of the ground without really pushing your hands down too much. The hands stay where they are, but really activate the shoulders on the back of the body to get your heart to lift, and it doesn't have to be really high. On your next exhale, tuck your toes, look down. Let's press up to hands and knees. Engage your belly, so we're in a modified plank, and then lift your knees up, lift your hips up and back, and take downward facing dog. Really rooting the hands and the feet into the ground, keeping the awareness on our foundation while also keeping our awareness on our breath, right? So we have our way of tuning into what's happening in both spaces, inward and of course outside of ourselves. Just a couple more breaths here. And a reminder that you can bend your knees as much as you need to get your hips back over your heels. We can keep elongating the spine. We don't have to have the legs straight. Let's start to take the gaze forward. Inhale, lift your hips. Exhale, step or walk your feet up to the front of the mat, setting up your forward fold. Line up your feet just underneath you and point the toes forward. And if you'd like, you can bring your blocks back in right in front of your toes. Shift weight into the balls of your feet. And on an inhale, we'll come up halfway and pause. Exhale, bow forward. Steady the feet, unlock the knees. Big breath in to reach up. Exhale, gather your palms together in front of your heart. Settle the shoulders, ground the feet, and we'll do that 2 more times. Inhale and sweep your arms back up toward the sky. Exhale, soften the knees, fold forward, fingertips to the ground. Inhale, float up halfway and pause. Hands stay on the shins, the knees or the thighs, if keeping them on the ground is not an option. And then when you're ready, exhale and fold all the way in, let the head go. Move your blocks if you need to, plant your palms firmly on the mat, checking in with the alignment, setting up the foundation, again, being aware, and then step or walk your feet back into plank pose, top of a push-up. And so for our practice today, we're gonna keep it in that basics level of the class. So I'm gonna bring my knees to the ground and I invite you to do the same. If you'd like to make this more challenging, by all means, feel free to lift your knees and take a full plank pose. It's your choice and it's your practice. Okay, keep your hands steady, look toward the front of your mat, firm your legs, your glutes, and take 1 more breath. On an exhale, hug the elbows in, hug the shoulder blades in as you lower down to the ground. Point your toes straight back. Inhale, lift your heart, gather the shoulders on the back of the body. Exhale, tuck the toes, press up to your hands and knees, and then all the way back up into downward facing dog. Knees unlocked or bent as much as you need them or want them to be so that the hips are all the way back. It's like you're trying to pull your hips away from your armpits. Hey, let's take a big breath in when you're ready. Puff up your back, shift your hips up and look forward. Exhale, step or walk your feet up to your hands and again set up your forward fold. Uttanasana is this pose. Okay, point the toes forward, unlock or bend the knees more if you need to. And with your next inhale, place the hands on the shins, knees or thighs. Come up halfway, pause. Exhale out of the nose, fold forward. And then soften the knees, inhale to rise, arms overhead. Exhale, gather your palms together in front of your heart, prayer. Let's do 1 more. Inhale, sweep the arms up toward the sky. Exhale, soften the knees, fold forward, pause, Uttanasana. Inhale, come up halfway and pause to lengthen, Ardha Uttanasana. Exhale, bend the knees and fold. Plant your palms on the mat. Check in with the alignment. And as you set the foundation, step your feet back 1 at a time, setting up your plank pose, top of the vinyasa. This pose is called Pulakasana. Okay, knees down onto the ground behind the hips. Option to lift them if you want to make this harder. Roll the shoulders back, look forward, and take 1 more breath. With your exhale, hug the elbows in. Keep the navel toward the spine as you lower down to the ground, and then point your toes back. Elbows stay next to the ribs as you inhale to lift your heart. And if you're feeling a little warmer, maybe lift up a little higher, draw the shoulders in and down. Exhale, tuck the toes, press up to hands and knees, and then all the way up to downward facing dog, Adho Mukha Svanasana. Ground the inner and the outer edges of your hands at the same time. Pulling the shoulders away from the ears as you breathe in and out of the nose. Let's start to make our way back to the front of the mat, starting with your next breath in, looking forward, lifting the hips. Exhale, step 1 foot up at a time, or just walk to the top of the mat. Set up forward fold. Align the feet beneath you, soften the knees, let the head go. And then inhale, float up halfway and pause. Lengthen the legs and the spine. Exhale, fold all the way in. Steady the feet. Inhale to rise, arms overhead. Exhale, gather your palms together in front of your heart for prayer. Pausing here. Let's inhale, sweep the arms back up toward the sky. On an exhale, soften both knees first, fold forward, fingertips down to the ground, and then let's pause. Start to heel toe your feet apart about as wide as your mat side to side. So my feet are touching the edges of the mat. And we'll spin the toes to point forward, making the feet parallel to one another. And again, these kinds of things might feel really tedious, and they can be, for sure, they can be. Right? But bringing our awareness to things heightens the experience and allows it to become something that we're much more involved with. Right? And then we can always adjust from there to make things, to enhance things, to change, to refine, to deepen. Okay, so let's plug both feet down. The inner edges of the feet and the outer edges of the feet are just as steady as one another. And then I like to bend the knees quite a bit, especially in the beginning of the class if the hamstrings aren't quite as warm yet. So the knees are bent, hips are high, and we'll move the hands back onto the lower back. Find that flat bone at the base of your spine. Interlace all of your fingers so you're clasping your hands. And once your fingers are all interlaced, keep your hands resting on your lower back, let your head go, and start to pull your shoulder blades in toward each other on the back of the body. Right, if you're anything like me and your shoulders are really, really tight, this is maybe not the easiest position. Okay, make sure that you're not forcing anything here. Just hug the shoulder blades in as much as you can, and then begin to pull your knuckles back behind you. Okay, we're not going to lock out the elbows, so make sure that's not happening, but pull the knuckles back and then lift your arms or lift your knuckles up toward the sky. Let your arms float forward toward the front of your mat. No muscling this. Please do not yank your arms forward. It doesn't matter how far your arms go. The feet are still steady, same place that we set them up, right? Bring the awareness there, and then bring your awareness to your breath. We're going to be here for a couple more rounds of breath. So continue to inhale and send the breaths, like intentionally send your breaths into your chest, widening your chest. And as you exhale, allow the heart to melt, let your head go, and maybe the arms float a little further forward, but know that that doesn't have to happen. And give yourself one more of those. Inhale deeply, opening the heart. Exhale, melt the heart. Maybe the arms move a little further forward, maybe they don't. And then very carefully release your hands, fingertips on the mat. Start to heel toe your feet back in. Line them up underneath your sit bones. Slide your fingertips back so that they line up with the outer heels. Right foot stays steady. Please step your left foot straight back into a long lunge. And let's pause here and just set ourselves up for a lunge stance. Okay, when you look at your feet, see that they're about as wide as your hips side to side. And we're going to use this alignment when we take our lunges today and in our practice. And this is not the same alignment that you might find in every single practice, right? This is just the one that we're going to practice today. And we're going to bring our awareness to so that it becomes something that we're more capable of doing more and more if we want to. Right? This also helps us with our balance to have our feet a little bit wider. It gives us space where the thigh and the hips meet. So let's try out this alignment. Point the right toes forward, and we'll set the right knee up somewhere over the right heel. What I really want you to feel on the right side is that your right heel is steady on the ground and the ball of your foot is steady on the ground. Keep all of that. We're nice and high on the tips of the fingers. You can use your blocks if you'd like to. And behind you, let's scoop the ball of the left foot back. Go about as far as you can. It might be a little longer than the stance that you're used to. And then lift your heel really high, right on top of your toes, as if a wall were right behind your left foot. Okay, so you might be in your longest stance. You can always shorten this if you really want to. You totally can. Okay, and let's push the feet into the ground and take a few breaths. Bring your awareness to your breath. And we bring the awareness to the breath knowing that there are other things going on. That doesn't mean that they're not taking place. Right? My right thigh is in fact burning, but I'm bringing my awareness to my breath. Melt the heart a little bit. Keep the hips a little higher away from the ground and plug in the belly. We're going to be here for one last breath. You can stretch your legs longer front to back if you'd like. And then start lowering your left knee down to the ground and pause here. Okay, your left knee is back behind your hip, and it might be about as far back behind your hip as it can be because of how long we took our first lunge. So just bring your awareness to this, right, so that we can adjust. We can always make adjustments. That is one of the beautiful things about practicing awareness and practicing tuning in. It allows us to connect to everything that we're doing a little bit more efficiently, if you will. So if your left knee is too far back behind your hip and you want to move your knee up, you can, or vice versa. You can move the knee back if you have space. Let's start to walk the right foot toward the right edge of the mat. Okay, line up your foot with the mat's edge. Open your right knee on top of your heel and place both hands inside of your right foot for a low lizard lunge. Okay, let's set up the hands so that they're underneath the shoulders. And wrists are about as wide as your outer shoulder side to side. Right, and as we practice, when we get into different postures, you might find, we tend to find that there are alignment points that, that connect with one another in completely different poses. And that might be supportive of a really good foundational starting point for our postures. Right? You don't always have to keep your hands here. You don't always have to line up your legs in these positions, but they are great places for us to start so that if we wanted to deepen, we could, and we have a place to go that we know our body is really able to connect to. Okay, let's either stay here, or if you'd like, you can take it a little deeper. Okay. For some of you, you're gonna stay right where you are. If it's an option, you can take your forearms to the ground. If forearms to the ground is not an option, but you've got your blocks or your books handy, right? You can always place your props underneath your forearms and the ground comes up to you. Now, while we're here, right, the right foot is about where it's gonna stay for this pose. We check in to see that the toes are still pointing forward and that we're establishing ourselves, we're rooting down. It's kind of like, focusing on your footwork when you climb. We want to make sure that the foundation is good before we go, before we move. We always want to make sure that we're breathing. We're tuned into what's going on inside of ourselves and outside of ourselves, and eventually that becomes an easier, more natural process. Please take your shoulders back, get the shoulders away from the ears, roll the heart forward, and we'll take one last breath in and out of the nose here. On your next inhale, please come back up onto your hands. If you're on blocks, just move them off of your mat. Lift your back knee high and step your right foot back into downward facing dog. Let's pause and take a few breaths. Right, and I may not be cueing for us to be checking into, our hands and our feet and our foundation, every single pose, and the idea is that as we practice doing that more and more, maybe we begin to bring our awareness to our practice and return back to checking in with things and tuning into ourselves, both on and off of the mat. Okay, let's start to switch sides in our lunge. This time we're going to look toward the hands, shift the hips up just a little bit, and then step your left foot up next to your left thumb. And as you step your left foot up, you might need to crawl your foot forward more to line your foot up so that the knee is on top of the heel and your foot's flat. You could even carry your foot forward. Okay, come up high onto the tips of your fingers. Point your left toes toward the front of your mat. Heel and the ball of the foot are steady. Keep that and look underneath you, and let's see about setting the right foot back a little bit further. Left leg, left foot stay where they are, but we're going to slide the ball of the right foot back about as far as we can, and from there you can bring it forward if you'd like. But we're practicing so that we can lift the heel high. This helps us keep the back foot, the ankle is really nice and steady, and the right shin is engaged, so the leg is turned on. And imagine the wall behind your right foot. High and light on the tips of your fingers, which means that the legs are working much, much more. And as you do this, push both feet down. You can even check in, you can even tune into what your awareness is the most focused on. Maybe it's not focused on one thing in particular, maybe it's kind of moving all over the place, which is okay, right? Please center your awareness on your feet, staying steady, and your breath moving in and out of your nose. You can follow your breath, notice where it moves. Fill up your back, fill up your belly. Okay, keep your legs strong, stretch them apart and away from each other, and lengthen your spine. Last breath here. Let's start to lower the right knee down to the ground and adjust your back knee so that it's where you feel best. You can either move it forward to shorten your stance or move it further back, or maybe you're good right where you are. Okay, we'll keep the back toes tucked and start moving the left foot over to the left. Line up the foot with the edge of the mat. I'm looking for the toes to be pointing about forward, right? There are other ways to take this pose. For today, well, let's keep this. Open the left knee over the heel, place your palms flat inside of your left foot, and pause. And we're not rushing, right? So in the Hatha yoga practice, which is this, the style of yoga that I am teaching, that we're practicing right now, we don't move in and out of poses very quickly, right? There are benefits to all the different kinds of practices. And in Hatha yoga, we have a way to really tune into the shapes that we're taking, to hold, to breathe, to connect to them in just a different way. Maybe you're noticing that here. And you can feel, right, that any slight little adjustment to the way that you place your hands, like if you move your hand, like if I were to move my right hand out off of my mat to the right side, it would create a very different shape, a different position than if I lined up my hands underneath me. Same thing would happen if I made any other tiny adjustment to my foundation. And through the practice of awareness, we can actually really bring ourselves into where we are and what we're doing. Okay, let's keep the left foot steady. Either stay on your hands or feel free to come down to your forearms for the last few breaths. So this is a different version of the pose that may or may not feel right for everybody. And just stay tuned into your body. This may seem like a deeper pose, and I just want to be really clear that deeper doesn't actually mean better. It doesn't mean that it's a better version of the shape. Everyone's body is in a very different place at all times, and our bodies are actually in different places every day. So just breathe, bring your awareness to where you are. Let's take our last full breath in and out of the nose here. Shoulders back, heart forward. Maybe the thighs are stretching front to back. And then we'll move back up onto the hands. Move your blocks or your props and align your wrists outer shoulder width distance apart. Begin to lift your back knee high and step your left foot back. Let's take a few breaths in downward facing dog. Both hands evenly rooted and shoulders are back. Let's bend the knees deeply, lift the hips high, and on your next inhale, look forward toward the front of your mat. Exhale, step or walk your feet up, come up into a forward fold. Line your feet up just beneath your hips, point your toes forward, and on your next inhale, come up halfway and pause to lengthen. Exhale, fold forward. Soften the knees, anchor the feet. Inhale to rise, sweep your arms up toward the sky. Exhale, gather your palms, lower your thumbs down in front of your heart, and we'll pause in prayer. And I'm going to turn to face you. so that you have a different view and kind of a better view of our next shape. Okay, so we're going to move into tree pose or Vrikshasana from here. And I want you to use whatever you need in your space. So if at any point during our balancing practice you're feeling like you'd like some balance support, feel free to use your couch or a wall or the bed or something. You don't have to do this freestanding in the middle of the room. Let's start by looking down at the feet, checking in with the alignment again, and this is just going to help us kind of find our way into support and setting a foundation, which again, we can always change at some other time. You can always decide to change the position of your foot at another point in time. For today, we're going to practice with the toes facing forward. Okay. I'm going to start with the hands on the hips. Feel free to join me. Draw the shoulders back, lift your chest, and start to shift your weight into your right foot. When you shift your weight to your right foot, let's keep the right knee unlocked. And there are 3 options that we're going to have, about 3, to practice our tree pose today. So one option is to turn the left heel toward your right leg and keep the ball of the foot down. So you don't even have to lift your left foot off of the mat. This doesn't mean anything about your practice. This is just a choice that you have. And with the heel slightly above your right ankle and the ball of the foot down, the left knee turns out and you're in tree pose. Okay, so this is one option. The hands can stay on the hips. Maybe the hands come together in prayer. Maybe you reach your arms up toward the sky, kind of like you're extending your branches and spreading out the fingers to grow your little leaves in your tree pose. Okay, maybe you are here in the legs, or you can start sliding your left foot up your right leg. And as you slide the left foot up the leg, you're going to start to balance on one foot. Right, so sliding the left foot up, and you have all of this space to play. You can place your foot anywhere against the inside of your right leg that feels comfortable and safe to you. There are a lot of common cues to not put your foot against your knee joint. It's really up to you. Traditionally, I was taught, for years, don't put your foot against the inside of your knee. Now we're learning that maybe that's okay. I want you to make the choice that feels the best to you. We tend in this practice to avoid placing the foot against the knee because it's very rare that we are actually putting that kind of load against the knee. Not to say that if you didn't do that more, that it would actually start to get stronger. So again, make the decision based on what feels right to you. Okay, you may need your hand to pull the foot up into your inner thigh, and when you get there, you're just going to start to feel some wobbliness maybe, and that's your body finding its balance. So do your best to keep the right foot as rooted as you can, maybe like moving around between the corners of the foot, and the hands can be wherever they feel best. Maybe hips, maybe prayer, maybe arms all the way up toward the sky, fingers spread. And then where's the awareness? Can we bring it back to our practice? And our practice today is keeping whatever's touching the mat, our foundation, steady, or knowing that it's rooted, thinking about how it's rooting. Bringing an awareness to our breath. How's it going in there? Breathing in and out of the nose. Maybe that helps us find some steadiness. Okay, let's very slowly bring the hands down. Release your left foot, and if you need to, shake out your right side. You can roll your ankle. Sometimes, to be honest, it feels good to kind of just jump around, and that helps recirculate on the side that you were standing on. And then reset so that your left foot is the standing foot. The toes are pointed about forward. Shift your weight to the left side and start to move into your tree pose on side 2. Same options here. And I'm going to give us ample time to find the posture that feels best. Now, as you set up side 2, we have that funny situation where maybe we absolutely have to do exactly the same version on both sides because it's the one that feels the best, or maybe side 1 and side 2 are completely different. Right, so bringing a really high awareness to how we're setting up on both sides to really maybe connect to something that is what feels like it is, working in its best or highest place. doesn't have to be right. It doesn't necessarily mean anything is going to be wrong. It just is something that we're doing to, again, heighten the experience and be more connected with it. So wherever you are in tree pose, like on this side, I'm totally feeling bringing the palms together in front of the heart instead of reaching up overhead. We have got a few more breaths here. We were on the right side for a really long time. So we're gonna hang out and focus on the left foot pushing down, making the legs strong. I like to imagine that the legs are moving toward each other in their positions and drawing the shoulders in on the back. Let's take one final breath in and out of the nose together. And then as you're ready, we'll release the hands and release the right foot. Shake out the left side, maybe jump around, which is what I like to do. And then we're gonna steady ourselves. I'm gonna move back to the top of my mat, which is where all of us were when we started our balancing practice, and align the feet again. Inhale when you're ready and sweep both arms back up toward the sky, lengthening the sides of the body. And as you exhale, bend the knees, fold forward, fingertips down to the ground. Anchor the weight of the feet. Inhale, come up halfway and pause. And as you exhale, begin to fold deeply in. Start to separate your feet, outer hips width distance apart. Not quite as wide as your mat. Okay. And then as you do this, heels as wide as the outer hips. And now we're going to turn the toes and the knees slightly out. Bend your knees deeply, lower your hips all the way down toward the ground. And now as you come down into this position or attempt to come down into this position, you may notice that the hips don't make it all the way down to the ground. You also might notice that the heels don't stay on the ground as you lower the hips at the same time. So if you've got your block or your books that you stacked, you can set up your block just slightly behind your sit bones. Not all the way back, you still want your feet steady, but just somewhere slightly back and underneath you. And then when you get there, you can use this prop setup to help your hips stay lifted and your ankles less flexed. And then we'll bring the elbows inside the knees, palms together in front of the heart. And we'll give our inner hips a stretch. And notice the weight in your feet. Just noticing them already heightens the awareness to them, right? So as you bring your awareness to your feet, root the inner and the outer edges down evenly. Please tone your lower legs, hug your knees in towards your elbows, and push your elbows back out into your knees. Draw the shoulders in and down your back, and at the same time as you're doing that, begin to open up in front of you more. Let's take one more breath, lifting up through the crown of the head. And then start to take your gaze down, release your hands. And we'll use our fingertips on the ground to push and lift our hips. Move your block if there's one underneath you. Plant your palms, start walking or stepping your feet back into downward facing dog. Doing a lot of hip stuff today. Maybe you're feeling it. Right, everything that you're experiencing, just taking note if you're getting information from your body. Okay, looking forward, please slowly begin to send your right shin up towards your right wrist. Open your knee wide and flatten your shin down for a pigeon prep. Okay, your right leg can be at a deep angle here. You can move your right heel toward your body as much as you need to. Spin your left kneecap to face the ground. And just like we did in the beginning of class, you can actually look underneath you, tuck your toes, lift your left knee off the ground. And once you do that, it's actually going to automatically spin the kneecap to face the ground, spin the toes to face the ground. So then you can just put it right back down, point your toes, shift your forearms forward, any amount that feels right, and lower your head. You can even use your block. One of my favorite ways to take this shape is actually to just give myself a huge prop underneath my head. And let's bring awareness to the breath. If if you needed any hip opening today, if you needed, or were really hoping for some focus in that area of the body. I hope that you're feeling nourished in some way. And let's start to walk all the way back up onto the hands. Tuck your back toes. Lift your hips and step back to downward facing dog. And then plant your palms. Readjust your hands if you need to. First fingers forward. And then look up. Inhale, shift to plank pose. You can lower your knees down here. We're going to lower all the way to the belly. Point your toes straight back. Leave your left hand right where it is. Bend your right knee. Reach back with your right hand and grab onto your foot. Let's keep the right knee in line with the hip so you can check in and make sure that the knee isn't popping out to the right side. Anchor down into the mat with every part of your body that you can feel is touching it right now. Your hips, your belly, your left hand, even your right thigh. Spread apart your toes and breathe in and out of the nose. And then we're going to gently release the back foot. Take it slow. Place your right hand beneath your right shoulder. Step your left arm out to the left side. Line up your wrist, your elbow, and your shoulder, and really check in to see that those parts are lined up. And then using your left fingertips, you're going to crawl your hand, you're going to crawl yourself over to the left like 1 or 2 more inches, and that will hollow out your armpit. Now push into the ground a little bit with your left hand. As you do that, you might be able to see your shoulder draw back a bit. Please bend your right knee again. Push the right hand down and start to twist onto your left side. Flexing the left toes towards your body and then spinning the right knee toward the sky as much as you can. Maybe the right toes or the whole right foot comes down to the ground. And we're still breathing here in and out of the nose. If your chest is feeling on the tighter side, if you're feeling like you're in a position that is a little harder to breathe in, maybe come out of it a little bit. And right hand gets to monitor how much energy is pushing down, which is also regulating how much you twist and push onto the left side. So don't push into the right hand if you're already pretty deep. Okay, left hand though, please push that down a bit. That helps us keep the left arm and shoulder active as we stretch it. And that's not really what we were focusing on today, but just so you do know, it is a great way to keep things online. Okay, we're going to inhale, come all the way back to the middle. Move the left hand in, tuck the toes, press up to your hands and your knees, and then straight up to down dog. And then we'll take pigeon pose on the left side, or pigeon prep. Okay, shift up, send your left knee toward your left wrist, so you're starting to turn your knee open. And as you turn your knee open toward the left edge of your mat. Anchor your shin flat and move your heel as far or as close, as far away or as close to you as you need. Okay. And we'll check back in with the right leg. I like to call the back leg in pigeon prep the cat's tail, because sometimes it does whatever it wants and we don't even know that it's doing that. Like sometimes we'll set up pigeon and our foot is like off of the mat. So look back, bring your foot in behind your hip. And as you go to fold and you set up, that gives us a really good vantage point. You can look underneath you, tuck your back toes, lift your back knee up so that we can establish that, knee and hip alignment also. You can just place the knee back down, and if you want, you can point your toes. And then lower as far down as feels right. And when you get down into your posture, which we're going to hold for somewhere like 5 breaths, let's call it. Just start to relax your shoulders, melt your heart. You might find that this side feels different from the other side. It takes a lot of energy to be aware. My neuroscience teacher says consciousness is expensive, which is true. It takes a lot more energy and effort to be aware. But the beauty of a practice that teaches us to practice being more aware is that it allows for us to then look at and connect to the things that we are doing, the things that are going on, with a set of fresh eyes, or with a deeper intentional vision, or sight rather. We're able to see things from a deeper place that allow us to also then perhaps see things from a clearer space. And we're not gonna be aware all the time of every single thing, but it is a way for us to bring a higher sense of focus to what we're doing, and hopefully to the things that we really want to keep doing and we want to be able to make adjustments to and refine. And let's inhale to come up onto the hands, tuck the back toes, press up and back to downward facing dog, and take a breath. You might want to wiggle it out, or maybe it just feels good to be still, right? Check in with what you're doing and why. And then look forward, inhale and shift up to plank. Lower the knees, engage your belly, lower down to the ground. This time right hand stays where it is. Please point your toes back. Left leg bends. Reach back with the left hand, grab onto your left foot, and scoot the left knee in so that it's right behind your hip. Breathe in and out of your nose as you push down into the ground. You don't have to be very high here, right? You can leave your chin on the mat. I like to lift my head just a little bit so that it lines up with my spine, and it's kind of lining up with how much my shoulders drop back. And so you can kind of monitor that for yourself. Firm your legs, firm your thighs, tone your inner shoulder blades, and at the same time stretch your legs, push the left knee back, open your heart. And then without slingshotting your left foot, release it gently. Take your left hand, place it underneath your shoulder, look to your right, and reach your right arm out to your right side. So here, right, especially when we switch sides, second side can become the side where we like totally turn everything off and we're like, oh, I did that and I paid attention on the first side. And so second side is a great place to notice your awareness, because side 2 is a different side of the body, especially, right? We want to check all the way in. So look to see if the wrist, the elbow, and the shoulder are lined up. Crawl yourself over to the right, maybe an inch or two, and then push into the left hand, bend your left knee again, press down, and you're pushing down with the left hand, but you're also pushing down with the right hand. As you push the right hand down, that's helping you activate the same tissue through the right side of the body that is getting stretched, which is really supportive. Curl your right toes toward your body. Spin your left knee toward the sky, or spin it open as much as you can. It's okay if your left foot is not on the ground, by the way. It's okay if nothing from the left foot is touching the ground. It could be floating in space. And if you're getting a hip cramp doing that, right, feel free to come out of it just a little bit. We're going to hold for one more breath. On your next inhale, start to make your way back to the middle. And once you make your way back, let's push into the ground and flip over onto our backs. Okay, so I'm just going to lift up and turn over. And as you turn over, plant your feet flat onto the ground, please. And when you look at your feet, like you can kind of check in side to side, let's line up the feet so that they're about as wide as the outer hip side to side, and your heels are underneath your knees. Yeah? And when you're looking at that and you're looking for that, right, this is where we're going to set up our alignment for today. Spin the toes to point forward. And there's space between your feet because the feet are apart, outer hips with distance apart. Let's anchor the head. The neck has a little curve to it, which is rising away from the floor. And we're going to set up the arms so that the elbows are plugged next to the ribs. Triceps are flat down. Point your fingertips toward the sky. I call this robot arms. My teacher calls this robot arms. It's like you're holding something in between your hands, palms facing one another. Okay, now the feet are super glued to the mat. We set everything up. We brought our awareness to how we were placing our body on the mat. So now we're going to keep that. We've established ourselves here to set up for bridge pose. Please keep your feet steady. Even the inner edge, especially the inner edge, which tends to lift up, push them down. Push your triceps down, push your shoulders down, push the head flat down, and start to lift your hips up slowly. And as your hips come up, flatten the belly. Check in. The feet might want to move, right? They might want to turn out. They might want to turn in. They might want to lift up. Keep the feet steady. Don't worry about coming up super high. Maybe walk your shoulder blades in toward each other. And as the shoulder blades get closer and closer to each other, you'll start to get a little bit more open at the chest progressively. Okay, now the feet are not going to move. We're going to keep them right where they are. Please firm and tone your legs. Make sure your breath is still with you. You're with it. And if you'd like, you can stay here. This is a really nice supportive version of bridge pose, Setu Bandha Sharvangasana, where you're pushing down and the elbows don't have to move, or your arms don't have to come out of this position. If you'd like, you can bring your hands down, interlace the fingers underneath you. We clasped our hands once before in class today, so you can come back to that position. Maybe switch up the interlacing of your hands if you really want to get something different. And as you're here, right, pull in and reach toward your heels. Feet still where they were when we began our shape, before we even came up. Breath is still moving in and out of the nose. Press into your feet as much as you can. Relax your glutes a bit here, right? If you're feeling anything in your lower back, unsqueeze your butt. One more breath to stretch the front of the body long, knees really reaching forward and down into the feet. And then gently release your hands, hips to the ground, pause on a flat back. And instead of hugging your knees into your chest, which might be what you're really craving, separate your feet as wide as the mat and knock your knees in toward each other. This will give the lower back the release that most of us really want after a back bend, without moving ourselves into something completely opposite of a back bend. And you're more than welcome to close your eyes and let everything soften here as we start to wind down and get ready to rest. Now the feet are going to stay just as wide as the mat, but now let's take the knees and lower them down to the right side. If you'd like, you can take your arms out wide. You can reach your arms up over your head if that feels okay and doesn't bother the shoulders or make this pose really, really hard or challenging or painful. Just let the front of your body open. Maybe notice the pace of your breath. Hopefully through our practice today, we've also begun to just notice that being aware is not the same as being critical or judgmental. We are observing. We are in a space of witnessing all that is taking place, or as much of it as we can take in as possible. Maybe focusing our awareness, observing something in particular. Let's lift the knees, take a breath in. Exhale the knees down to the left. Feel free to adjust your arms. They don't have to be in the same place for both sides. And as we let the body be heavy on the ground, just start to let things become more effortless. Relax. Let's take 2 more breaths. 1 more breath. Lift up your knees. Anchor your back. Move your feet in. Keep the left foot where it is. Inhale your right foot up without lifting your right hip. So soften the right knee. You might even want to bend it more so that we can line up the heel on top of the hip. Then move your hands behind your thigh and clasp onto your hamstrings with your fingers interlaced. Start curling your right toes down. Press your right thigh forward into the hands and pull your hands into the thigh at the same rate. So same time. While you do that, reach your heel into the sky. Try to make it the highest point of the pose. Let your head and shoulders relax. And then gently release, switch sides. As you lift your left foot and straighten through the left leg, straight does not have to mean that your knee is completely straight. Let's definitely unlock the knee. Okay, hands behind the thigh. Make sure the left hip is rooted, and we'll curl the toes down toward the ground on the left foot. Now with the toes curling down, push your thigh and your hands into each other. You don't have to really do this a lot, just enough to feel some resistance, and then through that resistance, start reaching your heel up into the sky or your ceiling, like you're pushing into it, without lifting your shoulders, keeping everything pretty chill. And then gently release, give yourself a hug, wrap your arms around your legs, maybe bring your forehead to your knees. It might feel good to rock side to side. Let's gently release, lay your legs down. We're setting up for our final resting pose, Shavasana. I kind of like to wiggle my hips side to side to get my hip band to settle onto the ground with as much ease as possible, and bring the feet apart, away from each other, feet fanned out. Arms down at the sides of the body, palms open, shoulders rolled all the way back and down. And as we set up to rest here, if you're feeling uncomfortable, you can always adjust. You can prop yourself up if you'd like. But let's take just the next bunch of moments to keep the eyes closed, to let the body completely release, and to even surrender the mind. Enjoy your rest here for a moment. Now I invite you to stay here for as long as you'd like, if you're comfortable, if you've got space, if you've got time, if it's starting to feel like you're getting deeper into rest or floating off into space. If you're ready to move out of Shavasana with me, gently and slowly wiggle your fingers and your toes and deepen your breath. Let's start to reach the arms up overhead and lengthen out the whole body. Stretch your legs. Reach your arms back. And then let's begin to bend the knees, flatten the feet, and roll onto one side. And when you get there, just let yourself be heavy for another few moments. Maybe notice the weight of your body, the effects of your practice, anything that feels different. We're going to keep the eyes closed. Press into your hands, use your arms, come all the way back up to sit. And we're going to meet in an easy cross-legged position to seal in our practice and bring everything full circle. We're meeting back to where we began, which kind of feels like a long time ago now. So find your seat, sit up tall, draw the palms together in front of the heart for prayer, a symbol of thanks, a symbol of gratitude, and also a way of recognizing and honoring the yoga practice, its lineage, its people, its ancestry, its history, right? That we are so lucky. We are so lucky to have this practice, having been taught for centuries and passed down, and now here on this on this digital portal being shared with each other to help heighten our awareness, to support us in becoming and expanding our consciousness, to become more aware as individuals so that we can connect to what we are, to connect to what we're doing, to connect to all that is around us more and more highly on and off of the mat. That's the practice. So my hope is that we are more conscious than we were before we began, and that we continue to expand that as much as possible. Let's close today's practice with the sound of one collective Om. Exhale all of the breath out of the nose first. Inhale through the nose deeply. Om. Let's gently bow the head to the heart. Thank you so much for joining me for today's practice. The light within me sees and honors the light within each and every one of you. And I am so glad to be here with you. Please feel free to leave any questions or comments regarding today's practice. It can be about something that you felt. It can be about something that you are unsure about, or you can just feel free to say hi. And I'll see you for the next one.